You know, he's certainly one that you've got to take notice of. A good winner at Fairyhouse last time at their festival. Got up £9 for that win, but deservedly so. I think Rocklander, it shows you. Tom George, 2 winners in well over a month. Could he have 2 in a day with Rocklander?
And if anyone's a Madonna fan, they might want to look at horse number 14, called Very First Time, one of the Trevor Hemmings horses, out of Like a Virgin. Cleverly named.
Very good. In the colours that will be carried by Warrior's Tale in the big one later on. We had a bit of controversy with the start yesterday. This lot look pretty keen, don't they?
Yeah, it's fairly safe to say they'll be going pretty swift here.
Hopefully they'll get off first time. Richard.
Yeah, they're pretty anxious for 3 miles and a furlong because they've got plenty of time, but a lot of these, and they're going to go too quick. He's not going to like that. They're going to break. And we've got one going round, so barely legal. And once that flag is waved, as we were discussing yesterday, the standing start will come into operation. Now, this isn't quite as complicated today. This might not take very long. Luke's down there. Just keep an eye on it, Luke, but they might go pretty quick because there's less of them yesterday, but it's still tricky.
Yeah, the jockeys broke the rules. They were cantering coming in, so now they've got to do a standing start. This is Sean Boner as Warriors tailed this side. He's on Pearl Swan. They're coming in. They're off and running, Richard.
Yeah, those still slow away at the back of the field, having to be driven in the early stages. Bells of Aylesworth, as they reach the first, they all get over it. Heist had a good long look at it. Bells of Aylesworth yet to really pick up the bridle, rather confused it would seem by that standing start. Hammersley Lake's the other one that's towards the back of the field early on, so on towards the second, which is the first of the open ditches. Thomas Patrick rows in front with Pearl Swan towards the inside. In third place we have Very First Time, and then Rocklander and Hollybush Henry just behind these, with Paper Lantern as they head on down towards the third. Wakanda is in midfield. Old Grange Wood is towards the right-hand side with the noseband as they make their way on towards fence number 3. And over in front, Thomas Patrick and Pearl Swan are the first 2 to rise. They are all over it, including Bells of Aylesworth, who remains detached by about 8 to 10 lengths. So Thomas Patrick disputing the lead with Pearl Swan. Pearl Swan in the red cap, Very First Time on the inside of the black and yellow colours of Hollybush Henry as they turn away. Rocklander next with Paper Lantern. Ibis du Rheu travels in midfield with Condor Keen. The wide into that bend was Barely Legal, who's posted about 4 or 5 deep, closest to us as they make the turn. By contrast, Old Grange Wood saves ground in company with Wakanda. Casse is next, just worse than midfield with Heist, and then on tour and towards the back. Bells of Aylesworth, who's now managed to close up. The pace seems to have steadied slightly as they reach the first down the back. So still a long way to go. Best part of 2 complete circuits. Thomas Patrick leads them over it. They're all over it. So far, Heist Jumping has lacked a bit of conviction. Grey colours just drifted back through the field as they head on towards another plain one. Thomas Patrick, under quite an aggressive ride here, leads from in second place Pearl Swan. Hollybush Henry racing in third place. Very First Time. So full Thomas Patrick didn't get very high there, but he's got to the other side. Once again, Heist made another mistake as Thomas Patrick leads from Pearl Swan in second. Hollybush Henry with Very First Time. Condor Keen, Barely Legal out wide with Ibis du Rheu in company with Paper Lantern. And then Rocklander. Old Grange Wood comes next, just ahead of Casse. Then Wakanda's just lost a place or 2. On tour still towards the back of the pack in company with Hammersley Lake, Heist and Bells of Aylesworth. Thomas Patrick asked up, but there was a mistake by Very First Time. His rider Danny Cook gathers in the reins as they make the turn left-handed. So out in front it is Thomas Patrick who leads from Pearl Swan in second. Still a long way to go, however. Hollybush Henry is in third place. Racing in fourth place towards the inside is Very First Time. Rocklander towards the cross fence with Paper Lantern, Ibis du Rheu and Barely Legal, who's been wide the trip as the leader steps over that. And we lose Rocklander. Rocklander is a faller there. Horse seemed to get perfectly okay. Trying to keep an eye on the rider for you as they make the turn. Rocklander for Adrian Heskin, who's got a ride for the National as they turn back towards home. So Thomas Patrick out in front from Pearl Swan, Hollybush Henry. In fourth place we have Paper Lantern, who's racing on the outside of Very First Time. Ibis du Rheu racing on the inner as they prepare to take the next of Barely Legal. Casse beginning to get a little bit more involved. Wakanda and Old Grange Wood on tour Hammersley Lake. Condor Keen is now being strongly ridden. Bells of Aylesworth is one from the tail as they continue their progress up the home straight. The back of the pack is Heist, who's jumping hasn't really gone to plan during the course of the first circuit and a half. So Thomas Patrick it is who's out on the front end, leads from Hollybush Henry in second place. The inside goes Pearl Swan. Paper Lantern travels okay, Very First Time in fifth. Old Grange Wood towards the inside in sixth, and a little cluster that includes the like of Casse, Ibis du Rheu and Barely Legal. Wakanda just worse than midfield as they stride over the next. Was out jumped by Hammersley Lake, then on tour. Bells of Aylesworth, Heist and Condor Keen is the one that is beginning to lose touch as the runners continue to make their way past the enclosures with a circuit to trap. Thomas Patrick it is who leads from Hollybush Henry and Pearl Swan, but the leaders are clustering up here. Turning away, Paper Lantern is just behind the leaders. Very first time, Old Grange Wood, his rider saved every single yard, as Harry Skelton on the inside of Ibis, Rheu and Casse. Wakanda travels just worse than midfield. Hammersley Lake in the orange colours has made some ground for Brian Hughes. And Bells of Aylesworth, who was the one that was slowest away, is for the first time getting involved towards the outside, as the leaders are all well bunched as they head towards 8 from the finish. Thomas Patrick again sees a stride, attacks the fence, jumps it really well. Watching the whole field over, Heist remains the back marker. 7 to take. Thomas Patrick from Hollybush Henry, Pearl Swan, Paper Lantern green and white towards the outside, barely legal in the purple colours on the wide outside. Old Grange Wood still picking his way through the field, but having to take the inside route as they step over that fence. Losing a bit of ground his very first time, now been passed by the likes of Pearl Swan, who's also drifted back through the field slightly. Wakanda's trying to make some ground up the outside with Casse, 6 from the finish. Thomas Patrick leads them. Then behind these we have On Tour, who's got in touch, so's Bells of Aylesworth, and there are a lot of chances here, 5 from the finish. So out in front, Thomas Patrick, again, aggressively ridden into the fence, trying to stretch them out. Wakanda's jumping was left a little awkward there. Bells of Aylesworth, having got in touch, is now being driven along as they make the turn back towards the 4th last. Out in front, Thomas Patrick leads Hollybush Henry. Paper Lanterns travelled very strongly throughout, but Donna Mailer in 3rd place, then barely legal. Pearl Swan still there. Old Grange Woods picked his way right round the inside for Harry Skelton to this point. Very first time, Ibis next to rise from Casse On Tour, getting a little bit involved, has moved through into 5th place as Thomas Patrick presses on as they turn back towards home. Thomas Patrick leading Hollybush Henry. 3rd towards the outside is Paper Lantern. Old Grange Wood continues to close. On Tour in the light green sleeves with the white sheepskin noseband. Ibis towards the outside. Their very first time still there as well as they head on down then towards the 2nd last. This is the last ditch. Thomas Patrick trying to run the finish out of his rivals. Hollybush Henry is in 2nd. Old Grange Wood, then Paper Lantern and On Tour. Another good leap by Thomas Patrick, and he now has this long searching run down towards the last. Thomas Patrick out in front for Richard Johnson and informed Tom Lacey. On Tour for Adam Wedge in the Bywise national colours, coming to try and pursue the leader. Hollybush Henry being pressed for 3rd now by Paper Lantern. Thomas Patrick comes towards the last, just has to sit and suffer slightly to find a stride, but he's over to the other side safely, and he still has a 3-length lead over On Tour and Paper Lantern, and driven out this improving young chaser Thomas Patrick is going to continue what's been an excellent season for Tom Lacey in the hands of the champion-elect Richard Johnson. And at the line, Thomas Patrick beat On Tour, Paper Lantern 3rd, Old Grange Wood possibly 4th, head of Ibis, Rheu, Hollybush Henry, then Pearl Swan, who was next across the line with Heist, who was never involved, Casse, very first time, Wakanda, and behind these barely legal. I think most of the others pulled up the home straight. An aggressive ride.